Hi, he's Vannyboy.
And he's Mattyman, and you're listening to The Rusty Playground, a Gen X-centric podcast where we talk about everything involving the coolest generation.
Indeed, the coolest. This week, we're going to talk about two movies from 1982, dovetailing nicely from our last podcast that was all about 1982. These two sci-fi classics were released on the exact same day in 1982. We'll each discuss one of those films. I'll be discussing Blade Runner, and I believe, Vannyboy, you were discussing
John Carpenter's The Thing. That's right. Basically, like we said, in 1982, the biggie that released was E.T. the Extraterrestrial. Of course, we all know this. Steven Spielberg's masterpiece about the boy who finds an alien that had been left behind, and he befriends it. They have a symbiotic relationship, and all E.T. wants to do is get home safely. E.T. phone home. It was a masterpiece, and that came out in June 11th, 1982. Literally 2 weeks later, on the 25th, they released the cyberpunk film noir masterpiece set in the future that you're going to be talking about, Blade Runner.
Yes.
And they also had The Thing, John Carpenter's The Thing. Basically, he called it John Carpenter's The Thing. I guess in his mind, he was to set it apart from the one that came out in the 50s, the Thing from Outer Space or whatever it was, which is like the original.
Yep.
John Carpenter had already made Escape from New York, which is incredible. And I think The Fog wasn't well received.
No, it was like, just meh by most people, but watch it. The atmosphere, definitely it's on. It'll definitely creep you out.
I think that from one of the reviews, I was actual Siskel and Ebert, I think, that I'd seen, and they were talking about they were disappointed in The Fog because Halloween is like genre defining, right? It is the start of an entirely different type of horror film, and Blade Runner was viewed radically differently than The Thing. The Thing was everybody was in the spirit for E.T. That's how they wanted to view. They just had this great, aliens could be our friends. And then they go to this, and it was kind of gross out for a lot of people at the time. That people weren't used to that kind of thing. And so it really ended up not getting received well. As time went on, that changed. I'll talk about that when we get to it. But that's where we're at, basically, in the gist of it. These two movies came out at the same time. They were just 2 weeks after the biggest heartfelt story, of a generation, basically.
For all generations, really. Everybody watched that damn movie.
Oh, I mean,
I watched it twice.
Oh, I've seen E.T. very many times.
Well, when I say twice, I mean at the theater, and then I probably saw it 50 times,
right.
Here and there on HBO
and stuff.
Yeah.
The last time I saw it with my son and daughter, and my son was 10 at the time. That only made me cry that much more. I was,
wow.
And because I'm like, I was there. I was 11 or whatever when 12 when it came out, and Elliot's 10, and so it touched me greatly. It was a game changer for me as a movie. And then all these years later, to see it with my son, who's basically that same age, and Elliot's dying, and he lets it eat. E.T. dies, we think, and all that stuff. It was overwhelming for me emotionally. All this symmetry of my life came together, and at the end, I thought that he and my daughter would be tore up, but they both had a really great mentality of, he got I'm thinking, poor Elliot, he's losing his best friend and all this. That's how I looked at it when I was a kid, but they looked at it like, oh no, he got to go home and be with his family, and he made it. And Elliot got to know him, and they were friends, and just like, damn, that's a great way to look at it. So better people than I have ever been.
Yes. Yeah. Well, you instilled some good values there, sir.
I got lucky. My wife's great.
Yeah. Oh, there you go. Oh yeah, that's right. It is her. Yes.
It is
Never
her. Mind. So anyway, Maddie, with all that set up, this dovetails off of E.T. These two movies are not E.T. They're radically different from it. Would you like to go ahead and set us off and let us know about the masterpiece that is? What are you doing? Blade Runner. Come on
Yeah,
now.
yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah. The
Do
masterpiece that's Blade
do
Runner.
androids dream of electronic sheep or
Yes.
electric sheep? That's what it was based off of. Philip K. Dick's short story, sci-fi story. But obviously, they were like, they can't use that for the name of the film.
Right.
So actually, they ended up buying the rights to a completely different book called Blade Runner, and actually, and specifically, William Burroughs' screen treatment of a book called Blade Runner. Does it have anything to do with this? No, none at all.
And I think people would be really surprised if you like had a list of the movies that have come out based off of Philip K. Dick books. They'd be
Yeah,
like, "Holy
like I don't
crap!"
know, Total Recall
Yeah, I mean
comes to mind.
he's super prolific, and I don't know if it was just that Hollywood was just looking for, we need ideas, and this guy's probably not super expensive. He's not Arthur C. Clarke or something, so let's just buy all of his stuff. I mean, maybe that's why they did it, but trust me, this guy is prolific. You've definitely seen at least one movie based off of something he did.
And you've seen some other movies that blatantly rip him off as far as what's real and what's real and what's what am I trying to say? The difference between reality and perceived reality, maybe is the best way to put it. I'm thinking of things like, I don't know, the source code seems very Philip K. Dick to me in terms of the protagonist who is reliving a certain moment back in time, but you find out he's horribly incapacitated from injuries as a soldier, and they keep putting him back in time 6 minutes. And that sounds like something he would do. That definitely, because it makes me think of another story that has yet
Yes.
to be made to a movie called Ubik.
Actually,
Which
didn't they make what was the one they did with Nicolas Cage, where he can like see 12 seconds into, I think it's called 12 seconds. I think it's 12 seconds into the future or something. And he sees basically all possibilities, and he can choose which path to take. So like if you have an army of people shooting at him, he can see 12 seconds or whatever into the future to know that, oh, if I dive over here, I'm going to die. If I dive over here, I'm going to die. But if I do this, I'm not. So it looks like he can,
oh,
dance between the bullets.
Rick and Morty did a thing like that, and that's where they got it from. Son of a bitch. All
Oh
right,
man, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to
no,
ruin
it's
it
okay.
for you.
No, it's fine. But getting back to this particular adaptation, at the time, Philip K. Dick did not really have any film adaptations. I think he had maybe one TV adaptation in the early 60s from one of his 1950s stories. But by the time Blade Runner came out, it started making them realize that, hey, we made, I don't know, no money, but we kind of almost made money. So let's do this again 20 years later.
We almost didn't make any money. We almost made money, so let's try.
But I will say this, all kidding aside, he did live to see the movie in production. And when he saw clips of the city, he said, that is exactly what I was thinking.
That is cool.
You filmed right out of my mind on that.
Very unusual because
Yep. He did not like the first script, but when they had a second screenwriter come in to kind of doctor the script, he liked that one a lot better. And then he came on the set, and he was really impressed with what they got, as far as the visual world he had built. Now, there's certain aspects to Blade Runner that are not covered from the original story. That is that everybody's got these android animals, android pets.
Mm-hmm.
But not just like cats and dogs, but hey, I got a goat, or like whatever. People just, for some reason, in this future world, they are really into having these electronic versions of animals, because I guess you can't get the real ones.
So is that why it's called do androids dream of electric sheep?
Partially.
Or is that just a pun on the, counting
Well,
sheep?
no, I think it works in two ways. One, you have the actual electric sheep in the story, but then you also have the whole idea of like, we think we dream of sheep, so an android obviously is not going to dream of a real sheep.
Do people have like non-real animal androids, such as, for example, a unicorn, perhaps? Can you have a dragon, or is it always just like, oh, I've got a llama or a camel or whatever, and they're androids, so they won't hurt anything?
It's been over a decade since I read it, so I'm gonna say I think it was just regular animals. Nobody was making cryptids.
Well, that's a missed opportunity, because you can make
I
a
know.
ton of money that way.
Yes, but it was a world that most people had fled because it was just, so overwrought with pollution and everything else.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty common topic at the time. Obviously it's supposed to take place in 2019. Well, we didn't end up like that, but 3019, who knows? Because we don't even have those little flying police cars that they have.
Right. We don't have flying cars. It's really impractical. Now, I
I can
mean,
only imagine when you've got the Jetsons going around.
well, there's
George would be on his his hands free in an argument with Jane, and now he's just cracked into was it Mr. Spacely's ship, and now he's twirling, he's heading to the ground, crashing.
Jane, I was drunk. I didn't mean for me and Mr. Spacely to end up sleeping together. It was a terrible mistake.
Okay.
Yes.
But moving along, what I was thinking was with Blade Runner, they didn't really get into android pet animals, whatever you want to think of,
right,
in the movie. That was not touched on at all. As far as the replicants, yes, that's the same in both. He has to go after these renegades.
So explain what replicants are and the general world that they're in, and maybe even what cyberpunk is for anybody who is listening who maybe has no idea what we're talking about.
Man, that's a lot. Wow.
So how did the universe begin, Matt? Just start from the beginning and tell us all.
Yes. Okay. So getting back to my train of thought. You killed me now. Thanks.
Sorry, man. That's why I have no friends.
Yeah, I'm your only friend. I'm all you've got. So basically the world that he is in, the world that our protagonist, Deckard, who's considered a Blade Runner, which is he goes after rogue replicants. Replicants being, I won't say they're not clones, they're not androids, they're actual flesh and blood, but they're manufactured humans that have a limited lifespan.
This is played by Harrison Ford in one of his dry spells as an actor, right? So
yes, yeah. He needed the work.
Yeah, he was
desperate.
He was he was Han Solo, and he was, of course, Indiana Jones, and he was Deckard, and he was Harrison Ford, who was cool as hell. So
all right, so you have this world that's not too distant from where we are. Well, of course, when it came out in the 80s, it was set in 2019. Well, we're not there, and we're talking about flying cars, and that's not going to happen.
Right.
Probably in 3019 they won't even have it, but hey, whatever. It's not like there's a lot of them, but there's enough of them to where you say that this is a sophisticated yet decaying world. So it's an urban, very gritty kind of feel. It's film noir, which is a pretty bleak view of humanity.
Yeah.
And yet with low lighting is essentially what that is. So it's like a multi-genre attempt at a science fiction. And it was way before anybody else was doing anything like this. So
it was its vision was extraordinarily bold, no doubt about it.
Yes. And
it's especially considered the limitations that they had, technologically, unbelievable, really.
Oh, yeah. Well, but as far as practical effects, as far as buildings and technology, they got the best guy, Douglas Trumbull, who did effects work on, well, the little movie 2001, A Space Odyssey.
Yeah. Can't count that high.
But pretty much any movie that was not Star Wars where the ships looked good, that was him. Like Silent Running.
Oh yeah.
Any of those ships, anything that's, like I say, looks like it could be in a reality, that's because of that guy. So he was brought on, and it's just a really sleek urbanscape. But then when you see it close up, it's just like the filthy streets, and it's just raining and pouring, and just like the filth of any large city, But yet in this world, what they don't really touch on much that they touch on in the book is that it is just a real crap sack world at this point, just from being overdeveloped and polluted. And so many people who've had the means have opted to just leave.
Right.
I mean, it's a shitty world, and they have replicants doing work on Earth, but they also have them going to these other planets or systems to do like basically space mining.
Right.
And the replicants are pretty much used for that.
For those who only they hear the word cyberpunk, especially if you're like Gen Z, you're probably mainly thinking of the video game Cyberpunk, which was based off of a role-playing game, right? But the definition of what they say of cyberpunk is basically it's a genre that includes a wide variety of visual aesthetics, but is recognized by its encompassing theme of high tech, low life. And that pretty much describes it pretty well.
Yes, exactly.
Yes, and it was definitely when I think of cyberpunk, I would say that the apex of the cyberpunk theme is Blade Runner. 1982, it's never been done better than that, in my opinion.
Nope. No, it's definitely not. So if you look at it, that world of it's futuristic and junky at the same time.
Yeah.
And so then you take that, but then wed that with your typical film noir of the 40s. You have the private eye who's going to go after whatever, who's hired to do this, and he's disgruntled.
Right. He'll wake
It's
up
sort
in the
of
morning and drink he sits at his desk waiting for someone to come in, and when they do, he's got a bottle of cheap rot gut whiskey in his bottom drawer, and he'll take a shot of it as he's thinking about the last time that he was went out to save this one broad, that kind of guy.
yeah. And he's usually just drinking to hold back the memories of like holding his buddy's guts in his hands, after a bad mob fight.
Yeah, no,
I went a little
yeah.
dark on that, but yeah. So you have that. So you have the film noir private detective with a femme fatale in a certain sense, but then there's also the kind of, what do you call it, the cop, the jaded cop kind of
Yes.
story.
Yeah.
So it meshes two early 20th century, mid 20th century concepts, and then weds it with this cyberpunk, sleek, futuristic technology. Nothing else was like that.
Do you think that like Gen X basically grew up with grandparents and stuff, that what we saw a lot of these, Sam Spade, Maltese Falcon, that we knew what noir was just from watching, AMC with our grandparents and stuff. So we knew what that was. Do you think that these archetype characters would be understood by younger generations that may not have had that? I know that Christina, my wife, she understood. She's kind of an older ended
yeah, but
millennial,
she's like a film buff.
Yeah.
So she would have seen classic movies.
Yeah. She watched stuff like that with her grandparents too. But if somebody is Gen Z and they're like 18 years old, they truly may have no concept of what those things, because those things were already old when we were in our when we were born, they were already old. So that we know them is only through the culture that we grew up in, our grandparents and our baby boomer parents. So it's definitely very removed. I think it would be more fresh. I think when we view Blade Runner, we're like, I see what they did here, and I see like the reflections of these other characters and this world they're building, and I get it. And it throws in a ton of really cool sci-fi stuff. But someone who's younger, at Gen Z, like I said, they may come at it totally fresh, not getting that Sam Spade and these type of.
Yeah, like in other words, they would go in not seeing the homage.
Correct.
Just like when we went as kids to see Star Wars, and we did not know anything about these 1930s Flash Gordon serials,
right?
Space operas.
Yeah.
But there is definitely an homage to that. But we enjoyed it outside of that.
That's a great way to look at it. I never thought of it that way. But yeah, I mean, so if you are listening to this and you happen to be
mind blown, man.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's pretty awesome, Maddie. See, that's why I hang out with you. But it was definitely very well done and beautiful and rich and dark and thought provoking.
Yep. Basically, it deals a lot with, just life, existence. I guess you would say it's got this existential, philosophical discussion because Roy Batty, who's the main replicant that Deckard goes after, has seen things that we'll never see, but he only has 4 years of life. So is it the quantity versus quality? What matters?
So what were for our listeners, what were the differences between a replicant and a normal human. So you hinted that they basically are given a much shorter life, even though they're stronger and faster and all that, but they're also slaves, basically, right?
Yes, they're slaves. And then the only way to detect typically between a human and a replicant is how they react to moments of empathy. So a human is going to react in a much different way than a replicant. But it just takes an X amount of questions dealing with empathy and checking their body's response to know this isn't a human.
Right. They have this thing that looks in their eyes to see if there's something on their retina or
Yes,
whatever.
the Voight-Kampff meter.
And it's so basically just when they're questioning people to see if they're replicants or not, because otherwise you can't tell. And they basically their eyes look like they're super dilated or something, right? It's very subtle, but they have to ask them to see if, like if you ask a normal human being about, hey, how about that truckload of dead babies they found the other day? A human's going to react in a different way because of our empathy, whereas they may be like, hey, well, whatever.
Right. Even if
I wonder
it's
what that does for humans that are, have no empathy whatsoever. There are those kinds of people.
yeah. Yep. And they probably say he's a replicant, kill him. Oh, he wasn't a replicant. Whatever.
No loss. Right.
Yeah. It's like, how do you know when you open them up whether they are or not? Because I think they're pretty much pretty close to humans. I don't know if they have all the organs. He never really gets into that. But my point is, this test to determine whether you're human or replicant really comes into focus when they bring in their latest version of a replicant, a much more sophisticated version, Rachel. She's the femme fatale in a way. This is the woman that Deckard falls in love with, risks everything, whatever that may be, his career, his respect from his colleagues. He's going to lose everything if he sticks with this replicant. And he flees
has a
with
very
her.
40s aesthetic to her. She's very that's the kind of the style. Some women dress up like they're, Rosie the Riveter 1940s hairstyle and kind of thing, and you have others that wear spandex, 8 layers of spandex and stuff. It's really wild.
Yeah, they definitely had different aesthetics going on for different characters, but she had definitely a like she would be an upper class woman, kind of like the kind that would go into the private detective's office and
Right.
and hire him to do something. She would feel like it's beneath her even being there, but she's desperate.
Right.
But in this case, he's assigned to initially to determine, just have a seat, run the test, see if she's a replicant or not. It took over an hour for him to finally conclude she was a replicant, and then he falls in love with her at some point in the film, which you just got to see the film, folks. But if you're gonna see a version of the film, what you don't need to see is the one with the horrible narration, which really made it bash her over the head like it's supposed to be a film noir. Mickey Spillane, Sam Spade.
Right. So
Harrison
explain the
Ford.
different versions, because I think that the first time I ever heard the phrase director's cut was with Blade Runner.
Right. There was a director's cut in the 90s, I believe, and that was not authorized by Ridley Scott. I'm not sure exactly what was added or removed for that version. The only version that's been edited and it's to his approval is the release in 2007, which I think really is the best version. It takes out the narration that the American release had. It adds some of the gorier scenes that were removed from the US theatrical version, but were on some of the European releases, and it was also the one that when you rented it. So he puts that in, puts in some extra dialogue. I believe the scene where he has the dream about the unicorn, I think that was added back. I don't think that was in the original, any of the original releases. It's definitely the superior one to see, because that's really the one where he got the time and the means, I should say, to make it like his vision.
So for those who haven't seen it, and since there's so many different endings to this thing, there's really no way you're going to fully spoil it. And frankly, even if somebody told me word for word note for note, scene for scene, every single thing, I would still say, if you haven't seen this movie, you've got to see it. It is absolutely one of the greatest movies ever made, but it is arguably the greatest science fiction movie. It is on another level and is such
Yep.
a paradigm from what science fiction was, almost like Star Wars was, or Star Trek. It's its own thing, and it has such a strong sense of itself that it has definitely launched 1,000 ships.
Yep. And I got the actual original author to like the adaptation.
Yeah.
So there you have it. Now, would you like to tell us about another movie?
Well, no, I want to say something about the your movie, because it's
Oh, okay.
freaking
Yes. Say
phenomenal.
something about my movie. Yeah.
All right, so the gist of it is that basically Deckard, he hunts down these replicants, and there's a gang of them, like 5 of them or whatever, that are led by Rutger Hauer, who is what's his character's name? Roy Batty. And basically Roy Batty and his people have, I say people, but his replicants have done lots of incredible things in their lives, even though they're slaves. They're not considered human beings. And there was no argument that slaves from the last 200,000 years that's lived were human beings. Certainly they were. These are completely artificial people. And one of the problems that he has is that he has all these memories and all these things his whole life that he's lived, and he's going to die very soon for like no reason. He's trying to figure out a way to prolong his life. And he doesn't really care who he kills. He's, of course, pissed and prejudiced, rightfully so, towards humans. So he leads these guys, and they don't care who they kill, trying to find a way to prolong their life. And that leads to, in the finale, there's a famous speech that Roy Batty gives. And Rutger Hauer, there was already something else that had been written for him, right? And
Yes. Yeah.
and
There was already that little soliloquy, whatever you want to call it.
yeah, and he went the night before they were going to shoot the scene, and he rewrote it to what we have at the end, which is just completely encapsulates everything that he's gone through. You can, even though he's been, this basically robotic almost killer through this whole thing, he's the bad guy. There's no doubt about it. And he's killed many people to get to this point. You see at the end, almost like you can appreciate how Thanos wanted to, you're like, well, you're completely evil because you want to kill half of everybody in the universe. But we kind of understand why you want to do it. His motivations were legitimate. His methods to it were not that great. But as far as Roy Batty and his people, he wanted to live. He viewed himself as, yes, he's not a human. He's a replicant. But when he dies, all of his memories, all of his experiences, all of those things will die with him. And that means a lot to him. And it means a lot in the scope of the film. I think it's one of the, Rutger Hauer is cool as hell anyway, right?
Yeah.
And
he was, and I will say he was basically, he didn't have to audition or anything. Ridley Scott already knew he was going to use him. He was like, this is the guy I want, just from seeing 3 of his films.
If you don't, you probably know who Rutger Hauer is. You've seen him for sure and stuff. But he was one of those actors where, for me and for Christina and probably for Maddie as well, when Rutger Hauer's in this movie, okay, I'm interested. Now I'm going to watch it. He's just one of those actors that's so unique and and he didn't just do like drama and stuff. He had comedy, he had action, he had all kinds of different roles that he did. He just, something about him, kind of like Steve McQueen, something about him was so cool and so charismatic that you couldn't help but enjoy his work. But my
Indeed, yes.
My personal experience with Blade Runner was my dad and my mom and my brother and myself and my sister went to see this at the drive-in one night.
Drive-in, yes.
Yes. And I can't remember what the second movie was, but the first movie was Blade Runner. And so it started with about, I don't know, 40 minutes left of sunlight. So, I mean, this is a super dark. I mean, like physically, visually, it is dark, not just tonally. It's a very dark film. It's set, everything's at nighttime basically, and all that. So to see it at a movie or a drive-in where it's still 80% daylight at the beginning of it, we couldn't see anything, and then we had this little speaker that we had hooked next to it. This was
I
even
remember this.
yeah. So this was what you used to do with drive-ins, folks, was you would just go to you'd pull in, and they had these little metal, terrible sounding speakers that were on a pole, and you would just take them and set them on your window, and that's how you would listen in mono from one side of the car. So you can imagine watching a phenomenal movie with an incredible soundscape, and you've just got Decker sounds like this every time on music. Yeah, it's terrible.
Now, if you went to a more sophisticated setup, that's when you could actually tune into a station on, I believe it was the FM band. Who knows?
Yeah, you might have had that, in Richmond where you were, but where I was in Roanoke, we didn't. We had that later, like considerably later. I should say.
I've been to both types. I'm just saying.
Yeah,
I'm just saying. If people were wondering, that's how it was done.
Yes, if you went to one now, what we're just going to have as far as audio goes is you're just going to tune into an FM station. They'll tell you turn to 91.3 or whatever, and it'll be surround sound in your car. I mean, it's going to be great. But in this case, not so much. Plus, you couldn't see most of it. You couldn't understand what was going on. This was a cutting edge movie, visually, tonally, character wise, everything. And so, our family,
no closed captioning. So you're like, what did he say? What?
Yeah. You couldn't have even seen closed caption because it was so poorly lit. And
yes.
When we left, we were like, that was terrible. I can't remember what the second movie was, but we liked that one a lot. And then years later, we saw it. My brother and I saw it on HBO. I think it was. I'm sure it was HBO. And we're like, holy crap. This has no peer. This is on a totally different level of awesome. I can't believe we almost didn't even watch it on HBO because it was so bad. The experience was so bad.
Wow.
Yeah. So, I mean,
so your environment, as far as can really impact, the entire process. I mean,
yes,
everything about that movie was stymied for you.
Yes. I mean, you can imagine now if you go and you've got a small screen and it's not very well lit and the people around you are loud and the audio for it is jumbled, you'd be like, it doesn't even matter if you're watching Casablanca. You'd be like, this is freaking terrible. And so that was our experience with it. And then when we saw it the second time, we're like, God, how could we have ever even thought this was anything other than mind blowing? So it was a funny experience. When you look back, as far as that goes. So, but it's great. If you haven't seen Blade Runner, I mean, at this point, if you're listening to this, I imagine you probably have, but if you haven't, you definitely have to watch it. And if you have, go watch it again. It's just
keep watching it.
Yeah.
Now, my last point to make, for me anyway, is I prefer it to be ambiguous as far as whether they'll make it or not.
Right.
The original theatrical release had this happy ending slapped on. Pretty much the producers made him have a happy ending. And then now it's left with his former supervisor is he's after him there, and we have no idea how long Rachel's going to live.
What about Deckard?
We don't know if he's going to make it. We just don't know.
We don't know if Deckard is a replicant or not. Throughout the whole movie, you kind of wonder, right? I mean,
right? Well, one of the scenes they put in the like I say the 2007 like Ridley Scott sanctioned cut. He has a dream of a unicorn, and that's the origami unicorns are always left behind by, I keep forgetting his name. Edward James Olmos plays the character.
Right. Yeah, I can't remember his name, but yeah, he's weren't they like partners at one point or something? Or he's his boss now or something?
I think he was a supervisor, and he brings him back in because Deckard was a retired cop. And so it's as if like, hey, we know you were dreaming about a unicorn, and I'm gonna leave you this origami unicorn in your apartment, which he finds. He and Rachel find that, and then you just see them fleeing. So it makes you think, so is he a replicant? Because he was, how else would this guy know to leave him a unicorn? So they're hinting at Deckard himself as a replicant, but at the same time, if he's a replicant, he would almost have to be more advanced than any replicant alive that he's going after. And why would they do that?
Well, I mean, it makes sense. Why would you send a human who can die to kill these, tough, stronger humanoid kind of, replicants? Why would you send a human to do that?
Well, that's a good point. That is a very good point. But for me anyway, I like the ambiguity of it. He could be, he may, he may be, he may not be.
Right. And they've asked both Ridley Scott and Harrison Ford, and I think that they disagree on whether or not Deckard is a replicant or not.
Yeah, Ridley thinks he's replicant, and Harrison Ford thinks otherwise.
Yeah, which is actually pretty meta if you think about it. If Ford was told to play this as a human, no, you're human. Maybe it didn't even get brought up, and he just assumes automatically that the character I'm playing is a human, and these other things are replicants, and that's how Deckard would have thought, because he had fake false memories and everything.
Yeah. So, but that's what's brilliant about it is they don't have to tell you. You can imagine it either way.
Yes, we don't have to have things. I think that's been a problem that Hollywood has had for a very long time, is that very much like when they don't want to play foreign films that people have to read subtitles, and then you see them on like Netflix and stuff like, Train to Busan or something like that. And you're like, man, I don't care that I'm reading this thing. This movie is just, great.
Hey, I don't care about reading any captioning on the screen, because no matter what it is, we've got the captions on.
Right. Yeah, that's right. We're all kind of trained for that now.
Yeah, we always have it on, because half the time I'm like, what are they saying? What? We start watching something, it's like, wait a minute, well, where are the words?
Yeah. Yeah, it's getting muddled now. Sound is, all those years of rocking and rolling, it's gone,
Yeah.
But I love that aspect of this movie of Blade Runner. And I think that not knowing makes it great. And here we are all these years later talking about it and wondering. And coincidentally, the movie I'm going to be talking about also has an ambiguous ending. Matter of fact, there is only one person on the planet Earth that knows exactly what happens at the ending, and his name is John Carpenter.
Yes. And what is his take on it?
Well, I will get to that and the controversy and so to speak. So basically, if you're not in the know, John Carpenter's The Thing is a masterpiece in suspense, paranoia, nihilism, acting, storytelling, terror. It is, I'm not overselling it, folks. John Carpenter's The Thing.
And once again, there's an existential dread about it all, because if it takes you over, well, we're getting into the details a little bit, but basically it makes you wonder, like, if you're actually seeing the person, the original person, or the thing who's now taken on that form.
The movie opens up with this scene of a spaceship flying through, and it crashes
2.5 million years ago.
Yeah. And so,
or something. Yes.
Yeah. It was millions of years ago. It was way before people, and Earth is frozen and it's in the Antarctica. So we don't know anything about it whatsoever. That's just how it starts. We're introduced to our crew, which consists of like I said, 12 men helmed.
12 angry men. Oh, wait,
yes. No. Ooh, never thought of it that way. But basically, when the film was initially written, the script was initially written, I'm pretty sure that McReady, played by Kurt Russell, at his freaking height of looking cool and badass, to be quite frank, it was still
can't argue that.
Yeah, he had just overcome a career as a Disney kid. The computer in sneakers or whatever it was, the the college, whatever. They had all these movies for
The
that Disney.
strongest kid in the world or
Yeah,
something like that.
all these goofy movies. He wanted to overcome that. And I think the first time people, certainly that I ever noticed that Kurt Russell was actually a really good actor was when he played Elvis Presley in what Matty had mentioned before is a John Carpenter made for TV movie, right? Wasn't it, Matty?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it was a TV production, but
I think his true breakout role, in my view, was Escape from New York. Came out
yeah.
in 1980, right?
Yes.
And he was such a badass in that film that everybody forgot that this was the guy in the goofy movies for Disney. He actually is the last words Walt Disney said when he died was Kurt Russell, and nobody knows why.
Wow.
Yeah, and so anyway, when he's in Escape from New York, his character Snake Plissken is so cool that it actually launched the main character Solid Snake for the Metal Gear Solid video game franchise. They totally copied him on it. And so for him to be in this role was just one more check mark on how awesome is Kurt Russell. And
yep. Yeah, he was definitely breaking as far as he could from his like family friendly roles.
Yeah. Yeah, and they weren't crass for crass sake. These were just interesting characters. But anyway, I think
McReady, he had some real meat. Yeah,
yeah. McReady is. I don't think he was initially. He was just supposed to be like one of the guys, kind of thing. But Kurt Russell's so charismatic and everything that they kind of changed it around. So he's really, if this movie has one particular protagonist, it's Kurt Russell's character McReady, and so they have, and I'll just go down a list of guys real quick for the characters because it's only 12 of them. So you got McReady is Kurt Russell. You've got Keith David as Childs. Most people have known Keith David. He's a black actor he was also in They Live, another John Carpenter film. He was in it with Roddy Piper. He's got a really famous voice, an amazing voice.
Yeah, he got into voice acting.
Yeah, and if you've played Mass Effect, he is Admiral Anderson. He's just a great voice actor. He's a great actor. He's really cool. Even though some of these characters are sort of bit characters, they're not used as much. You just can't see anybody else playing these roles. They matched very well. Part of that is because Carpenter sent them out to live together for like 3 weeks before they shot the film. Wow,
I did not know that.
Yeah, so their camaraderie and things that they had, they all sort of lived partially as themselves and partially as their characters. So that's part of the reason why it all just meshes so well.
But also that was kind of a highlight to me of the movie is that they're not playing just a bunch of stodgy characters like as if it was a 50s sci-fi.
Right.
Like the original, like
yeah.
Everybody seems very stiff and formal.
Yes.
And this seemed more like just a bunch of guys working there, in different fields. Like, this one guy works the radio and, whatever. And you had a doctor and you have whoever else is there for doing whatever their trade is. It's not, I don't know. It didn't seem glamorous. It wasn't glamorous in the least. It just looked like a regular, functioning camp.
Yeah. I would say that one of the best ways I could describe the acting in this is organic. They really all just come across like regular people. They don't come across, none of them are like, I mean, obviously Kurt Russell as McReady is a badass, but I mean, you can tell this was also like we'd mentioned before in the last episode with the other movies of 1982. Yeah, a lot of it was insinuated that a lot of these characters were, had been in Vietnam and they, had military experience and maybe had just wanted to kind of get away from other people. And, Kurt Russell really comes across that way. He doesn't come across like you go see Die Hard and Bruce Willis is like just, super cop. None of these characters come across this way. They come across like, McReady was like a trained soldier. And so he's not perfect, but he's bold and he sees the threat. Once they all realize that the shit hits the fan here, they're very believable. So you've got Wilford Brimley, who mind-bogglingly was 48 years old when he made this movie.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
What?
Yes,
Oh my
he was
God.
48 years old. So he was, basically 5 years younger than us, and he looked like our dads, right? So
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
but he didn't have a mustache, so that was
Yeah. This is
off-putting.
pre diabetes
Yeah.
Quaker Oats.
Yeah, this is before Cocoon, which is really where he
Yes,
leaned into that.
exactly. That's yeah.
And he plays Dr. Blair, who is like a medical doctor. I think they have two medical doctors there. Richard Dysart, who played, he was in L.A. Law years later, played Dr. Cooper. There was a man, Peter Maloney, played this guy Bennings. There was a character Fuchs, a character Knowles, a character Palmer, a character Gary, which he was kind of like the guy that was in charge of everything. He was supposed to be in charge. And you had a man named Windows, you had Norris, and you had Clark. And Clark was in charge of the dogs. The crux of it is that one day they hear some gunfire. They go outside. They see this dog running from a helicopter, and there's people in the in the helicopter shooting at the dog. And of course, it's like a total what the hell moment. And the helicopter like crashes or lands or whatever, and the guy gets out and he's shooting at the dog as the dog's running towards them. So he's totally shooting at them, and they're like, "What in the world?" So the dog runs over to them. They shoot the guy. They have no idea what's going on. Why in the world? And of course, they have their own dogs because it's they have sledding and all that stuff, I guess. And so there starts our mystery of what in the hell
Well,
is going on.
if only they had spoken Norwegian, they
Yes,
would have known.
right. The guy gets out and he's yelling at them in Norwegian. They have no idea. He's just shooting at them. He's crazy as far as they know. So basically, this dog runs up to them. They shoot and end up killing the Norwegian. They're like, we don't know what's going on, but take this dog and put him in the kennel with all the other dogs. And Clark does that. And then they have a scene where you see the dog is kind of, before they put him in the kennel, he can just kind of walk around wherever he wants. They just let him go around. And he walks into this one room where you see a man's silhouette, and the guy has curly hair, and he can be one of three guys from what you've seen. John Carpenter wanted to make it so undetectable of who this first person infected was that he actually used a stand-in, another man, another Caucasian with curly hair, so it could be one of the three other curly-haired Caucasians in there. Just don't know which one. But so they used a stand-in, and that stand-in was a stuntman who actually was the guy who was under the mask in Halloween. So the guy who played Michael Myers, he's the silhouette here. So it can be one of these three guys, but you don't know which one. And he made sure that you couldn't just guess it. But most people have figured that it's Norris because of just a collar that they have. And Norris is the first person to be infected. Now, nobody knows this at the point. All they know is that they got a dog from the Norwegians. They don't know what the hell's going on. So they want to see what's going on. So they take a helicopter to where the Norwegians are. And actually, did the dog kennel scene happen first? Do you remember?
The dog kennel scene is, I think, the very first.
Yeah,
They get a glimpse of any of this happening.
Yeah, so yeah. So basically, the first thing that happens that they know something's wrong is that there's as we see, the dog that's in the kennel kind of just sets down and then starts to literally fall into pieces with different tentacles and tendrils and all kinds of things coming off of his body, wrapping around the other dogs and spewing, some kind of liquid, which, fans assume later who've studied this, like it's the Bible, basically, and try to figure out what's going on. Is this some kind of way of digesting? And he starts tearing all these dogs apart and ingesting them. And his mass gets bigger, and it's like this character, this alien that we find out it's an alien, doesn't have a form. He doesn't truly know what it's going to be. And so it can decide, oh, I've got this mass, so I can become 2 or 3 dogs, and I can better my chances of infecting more and taking over the earth or whatever its mission is. We don't know. It's totally alien. And so it's an unbelievable scene and there's like 3 or 4 set pieces in this movie that are just make it stand out. But the first one is in the kennel. This dog just rips itself into pieces, and it's practical effects that were done by a man named Rob Botton, who I think had been night. What's the one? The not Night of the Living Dead. What's the one? Day of the Dead or whatever. Where they're in the mall.
Yeah, that's Dawn of the Dead.
Dawn of the Dead. He was in it, and he's the one who's actually ripped apart where they pull his guts out and stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, he did that character, but he's also the special effects guy who was pretty gory and all that. So he brought that into this, which absolutely sets this film apart from any other film that's ever been made. It yes, you could tell then and you could tell now that it's practical effects and that there's some animatronics and servos going on and stuff, but it's how they've made this creature unfold and things just pour out of it. Like at one point, the dog, like I said, is just this massive goo basically, and other dogs' heads kind of fused in with his body, and then his head splits open, and out from his head comes out looks like a flower almost. But if you pause it and see, it's not a flower, its petals are made of dog tongues and stuff. So this guy just, yeah, he made it his life. It took him over a year to prepare all of this stuff, to create these things. And it became his life. And, it has, of course, slime and goo and everything else, but it's shot as well lit as it needs to be and as dark as it needs to be to pull it off. They, of course, are shooting at this thing in the kennel, and it's not having any effect. So Childs, I believe, comes over and just starts. He has a flamethrower. I'm just assuming everybody that lives in Antarctica has a flamethrower because
yeah, and they think they use that thing like liberally in this.
Yes, they literally, it's the only thing that saves these, that has any chance at all.
I always think it's amazing how many times people are burnt and things are caught on fire, but it doesn't burn up the whole camp. Like,
right, at least not at first. And
yeah, well, then later, yes, they intentionally sabotage gas, that kind of thing. But I would just think flamethrowers in general, if you're shooting up stuff and it's burning, it doesn't just go out 30 seconds later. But
no, it doesn't. It doesn't. And so this thing is like transforming in front of the dogs, and then dogs are going nuts, and it's ingesting them. And McCready and the rest of the gang come in there, and they're like, what the hell? You can't even imagine. So they use the flamethrower, and it kills it, and it's just a pile of goo. Like I said, they eventually take it and bring it to study it, and that's where Dr. Blair, Wilford Brimley, is kind of just doing a dissection of it, and you really get to see that the artistry of this special effects guy it couldn't be better. It's incredible how different shapes and forms of different animals and people and stuff are just, he like cuts it open and he pulls out another dog from inside of it. So he comes up with a hypothesis that this is an alien creature that infects people. And they say infect, but really it's ingests people. It takes them over completely on a cellular level and can mimic them. And at any time, if it feels that it's in danger, and it's starting to get caught, it can change its form to fit whatever situation it's in. So say Matty is the thing. It looks just like Matty, and I'm talking to him, and then when the jig is up, if I start to get a flamethrower, it can rip itself into pieces. It can as it does later, transforms itself to try to get away in ways that you just, as a human, you'd be like, what? I can't say enough about, what the work that this man,
I mean, it's beautiful, yet it's grotesque, and that's the thing that what people had trouble with at the time. Yes, it was like nothing else you'd seen, but it is kind of a gore factor involved. But it's not even gore per se, like human gore.
Right.
It's just really over the top, like something totally alien to us.
And nothing.
Since it is alien.
It is alien, right? And
but it just was done in such a graphic way that people weren't ready for that.
Weren't ready for it, no. And no, you weren't ready for it at all. And young people like me and you, we were just whoa, it was like incredible. Yep. But for people who at the time, the worst gore they had seen was probably Jaws, right? So this is just not even on the same level. It is so inventive and creative and disgustingly beautiful and
Yeah.
beautifully vile. And the budget for this movie was $15 million, and they used 1.5 million on special effects. So
Holy moly. I mean,
but
that seems like nothing. I
yeah,
mean, even if with them, their budget, that was like only 10% of their budget.
right. And this guy did, like I said, it took
It's
him a
incredible what
year
he
to
did.
make it. And he didn't even have enough time and resources to do it all. So they ended up calling in Stan Winston, who gets a lot of credit for this, but actually it was really Rob Bottin who did.
Hmm.
And Winston will say that. It's like, no, I just did this one piece. But it's a hell of a piece. So anyway, they burn this thing and then they dissect it and they realize, this is not of this earth. Obviously, nothing's even close to this. This is mimicking people. Blair looks at runs it through a non-existent computer program, that would never actually exist, particularly then, and is like, hey, this thing takes over at a cellular level. How long would it take if it could get out into the populace and if it wasn't caught, how long would it take to take over the world? And it was like 3,000 days, not even 10 years. And so Blair realizes this is the end of the world. This is the end of humanity. So he freaks out and wrecks the communication. So the radio, CB radio and all that, or the radio that they talk to, the people in the mainland to come get them. He breaks it up because he's told Kurt Russell, he's like, this, we can't let this thing out no matter what. We got to kill it and then all die to make sure that this thing doesn't leave here or it's the end of the world. So these guys know that it's pretty high stakes. But at one point, the guy Norris, he has a heart attack. So they're trying to bring him back to life, and they bring the the clear, those electrical things, right?
Yes.
Um,
Tries to defibrillate him.
yes, that's right. But of course, this thing doesn't. It tries to survive it any way it can, and the only way you find out that it can be destroyed is on a cellular level, and electricity will do that. So the doctor, Cooper, not Blair, who's trying to defibrillate him, pushes in. He pushes in with him, and when he does, the guy's chest opens up and is a giant mouth full of sharp teeth, and then just comes in and bites both of his arms off. And it's rather shocking.
Yeah,
scene.
That's really over the top.
Yeah, I mean it's
and my wife's like, that's just like cheesy looking. I'm like, no, it's the whole thing. It's an alien. It does things its own way.
Yeah, it's not. It doesn't. There's no limitations to what it can do physically, what it can transform into. So you think, oh well, don't look at it as a person. Look at it as a massive living consciousness. And so all it knows is, oh, I'm going to get shocked again. I've got to stop that, even if I'm outed. And so it bites his arms off. Now they hired a guy who had lost both of his arms in an accident to come in, and they put a mask on of Richard Dessart, the actor. They put it on him, and so he's like got his nubs that he's kind of putting up in the air as he screams. And McReady pulls out the flamethrower and fires them both up. And to protect it, to continue its life, the thing grows the neck from the head to the shoulders of the character and ends up making the head like falls off to the ground and then sprouts spider legs
and eye stalks. Don't
and
forget
eye
that.
stalks, right? And starts to try to skitter away. And ironically, you find out later Palmer is a thing. Palmer and Norris was the first human infected, and then at some point off screen he infected Palmer. But Palmer does point out, he turns and looks, and then what's a great scene as this thing's skittering out, he looks and then they start to look and he goes, you gotta be fucking kidding. And they torch that thing. So they kill it. So as far as they know, that's it. They've destroyed it. So they go to the Norwegian place to find out what's going on. They find out that the thing had been killed there and apparently had become the dog. They had stumbled across this giant spaceship and they found this entity and brought it to study it, and it thawed out, and that's the thing. and it mimicked itself into them. Who knows if it was the only thing on the ship that crashed? Who knows? Nobody knows anything about this. It's completely alien, and that's how they wanted to leave it. So they realize Blair has totally freaked out, so they put him in this other place away from them, locks him in there. They're like, you need to calm down, and we'll be back, because he's destroyed their equipment and stuff. And he pulled out a gun. He started shooting at all of them that came to him. When he ran out, they tackled him, and then they put him in solitary confinement, basically. But MacReady kind of disappears for a bit to look at something, and they lock him out, and they're convinced, because everybody at this point is super, super paranoid. They don't even know who is like their actual person, or this monster.
Well, and that's why also he was shooting at all of them, because he didn't know who was still human.
Right. Yeah. And he was the only one at the time that realized, we can't get out of here now. We've all got to die to save humanity. So they locked MacReady out, and Childs in particular was adamant that, hey, we can't trust him. Well, MacReady shows up, and he has flamethrower and dynamite, and he's like, I'm going to blow everybody up here. I know I'm not a thing. I don't know which one of you are a thing, but I've got an idea. We're going to do a test. So they do this scene where they take blood from everybody, and he figures that, well, since this thing is like a communal creature, basically at a cellular level, it won't understand that it's a test. If you take part of it, a small part of it away, and test it, it won't be able to hide when you try to kill it. So he takes blood from everybody, and he lights up a metal stem real hot, and he holds his blood up. He says, well, here I'm going to show you what I already know. And he takes it and he puts it in his blood, and so there, that's it. And then he does another person, and it works. There's no problem. So as he does each one of these characters, he lets them go, and they come next to him and help him, because they know he's not, they're not, but they don't know anybody else is. And in a one of the greatest jump scares of all time, but it's not cheap. It's built up perfectly. It's timed perfectly. It's not like, the cat in the closet. It's not that kind of thing. They have two people left on that they have tied down, and one of them had the keys. So they're like, yeah, you had access to these other things that have gone missing, because you're the only one we know that has the keys. So we're going to do you last. And he goes to do Palmer's, and when he does, the blood jumps out of the
petri dish.
The petri dish just jumps out. Turns out, special effects wise, that was a fake hand and into the petri dish. So they had the thing underneath it. So the blood.
Okay.
So they pushed it up, and so it doesn't look like splattering blood. It looks like a solid thing, congealed thing together, and it falls down and starts to move off screen. People surmise that the blood itself was like going back to Palmer, who was the one that was the main body. And MacReady drops the flamethrower, and he ends up, it's not working right because of suspense. And then he ends up having one of the other guys, Windows, who is right next to Palmer as he just changes his form right in front of him, and it's this giant mouth that just like grabs him. And then so the shit hits the fan, and it just becomes a run from one room to the next, trying to find people. You don't know who to trust. You're in absolute abject terror at all times, not knowing. The only one as a viewer that you're sure is not a thing is MacReady, the hero. He's the only one that you.
Well, there's, up until that point, we don't, nobody can just assume somebody else is not going to then be consumed by the thing.
Right. So I guess as a viewer, you just assume that MacReady is not the thing, but you don't know who, and you're with MacReady almost the whole time, but he's not with all of these people all the time. So, they go off screen and they come back, and you just have to wonder, has he been assimilated? You don't know. You have no idea. But so, the movie devolves into this, how are we going to figure each other out? We've got to stay together. They're trying to figure out what they're going to do, even for the future, like how, because they know, and all of them that are humans know, we can't get out of here. we've got to try our best to stop this thing, kill it, and then that's it for us. We just accept the fact that we're dead. We just don't want to become an alien. And so they go to see Blair, like I said, who had been put in basically solitary confinement. The first time that he goes up there, he's told, watch out for Clark. Wilford Brimley, Blair, is at that point a thing. He had just told, watch out for Clark. And Clark tries to jump him to get the gun. And McReady turns around real quick and just shoots him in the head. Boom. And that's it. He's dead. So they move his body over, and then they do the blood test, and they find out that Clark was not a thing. So McReady just killed this human being, but he doesn't know.
But Keith David's character says, so now you're a murderer.
Yes.
Something
right.
like this.
Yeah. Now you're a murderer.
Yep. But and that gets all back to what's real, what's life,
Yeah. He has
once you're assimilated, don't you think you're the person anyway, or do you not?
No, you're the thing, because you know that you are this alien creature, even though you
taking a form. Okay.
Yes, you have their memories and stuff, because they can speak English, they can, they know how to wear clothes, they know how to be.
So basically, it's just trying to impersonate you at that point.
Yes, but it's armed with all your knowledge basically, and they know that they're the thing. And so the theory is that they are just, if you are assimilated, Mattyman is dead. You're gone. Your soul, you don't have no soul. You are not you anymore. All of your cells, all the way down to cellular level, are replaced. So there's 4 of them left that they're pretty sure are human. And at this point, they even tell each other, we're not getting out of here alive. This is our job now, is to kill the thing, make sure it's dead. We're going to have to go up and find Blair and find out. We'll run the test on him, see if he's a thing. If he is, we'll kill him. If not, then we'll make sure that this whole operation is burned to the ground, and we'll all just die as humans. So they tell Childs, hey, you watch out, where the place where Blair is, make sure he doesn't try to get out. And so there's a pivotal scene. This is I'm mentioning this for a reason, where the camera is showing Childs, Keith David, and the camera pulls out. And as it does, you see on the wall, so Childs is wearing a blue jacket, and there's a tan jacket on the wall. There's some shoes on the floor and stuff like that. And he's just looking out. And then the camera pans in a way where it's on one of those dollies or whatever they're called, like they used in Halloween, where you're looking at from Michael Myers' point of view, where he's like walking through the house and stuff. They use that for this purpose. So we just assume that we're the Blair thing, and he has gone through a tunnel and comes out. So the next thing you know, you've got the other 3 guys, McReady, Gary, and Knowles, are outside, and they see Childs leave the facility right as the generator dies. So the power's going out. We assume that basically the thing that's still alive is like, hey, they can't survive the frozen, but I already have for millions of years. So I'll just freeze myself, and eventually I'll be unthawed, and I'll be able to take over people. Well, so it looks pretty suspicious for Childs, for sure, because he just takes off. And then you have the big final boss battle where McReady and Gary and Knowles go to confront Blair, Wilford Brimley, and he's not there. And they discover that he's obviously a thing. He's dug a big hole and a big underground cavern, and he has been using parts of the helicopter that had blown up and some of the machines that he had destroyed. He's using those parts to try to build what some people think is a spaceship. Other people think, well, it's really just a ship that he can just get the hell away from all of these people and get to like more populated area. Nobody knows.
Yeah. I don't think he's going to find enough gear to actually get off the planet, but that's my opinion.
Right. And, the thing is that we keep saying the thing, so we'll just drop that, but it's, what I'm talking about. The
crux of the matter is.
The crux of the matter. There's, thank you, Mattyman. The crux of the matter is that this thing absorbs life and absorbs their memories and absorbs everything. And he's come there on a spaceship. So whatever, possible millions of other intelligent life, including spacefaring advanced life, he's taken over. He has their memories and their knowledge. It has their memories and knowledge. So he has the ability to, create things that we can't create. But he is limited by our technology and stuff. So he has to figure it all out. And he's kind of, trying to panic and trying to do it while also assimilating others or just trying to hide. But they catch him, and Blair kills Gary in a really wicked looking effect where he like puts his fingers onto Gary's face, and his fingers look like they're almost underneath his skin.
Yeah, like they're just going through his face.
Yeah, it's wild. It's a really cool effect. And he kills him, and then Fuchs, both of those guys are fighting this giant monster. So basically it is used Blair's body, Blair's matter, Gary's matter, and Nall's matter to create his own big thing.
His own monstrosity.
Yeah, that is just a fusion of everything that we've seen and things we haven't even seen. It's an incredible accomplishment of special effects. It really is. And luckily, MacReady has dynamite. They've been using these bottles of empty bottles throughout the whole thing. You can tell that MacReady is, a pretty hardcore alcoholic. He has a lot of J&B whiskey, which is a great product placement throughout the whole thing.
I didn't even think about that.
Yeah. And later they use them as Molotov cocktails. So he has these things and he's throwing it, but he also has dynamite, and he throws it into this big pile and it blows up. It's just, and he barely gets out in time, and it's definitely blew this thing to pieces. There's no doubt about it. That's how you kill it, with fire and probably acid and electricity. But other than that, shooting it and stuff doesn't do it, but it can be torn apart. We're pretty sure that's what happens. This massive explosion. And, so the Blair thing and all of his parts, they're gone. So in comes.
How do we know? How do we really know all those parts are gone?
Well, I mean, it was throughout the whole thing, they've used fire to destroy this. And this whole camp is on fire, and this giant explosion of fire.
Yes, I know. We think, it's all, yes.
Yes.
It's only when you're thinking about it years later, I think, wait a minute, maybe.
Right. I mean, you think, well, if a little bitty piece of it was still around.
But anyway.
Yeah, right. So
the explosion, and then the plot continues.
Right. And here comes what really, really gives legs to this movie. So you have MacReady, Kurt Russell, sitting there, exhausted, haggard. The whole place is burning down around him. He's sitting away from the fire. He has his J&B bottle, with him, and he's exhausted. He's killed the thing. He goes to take a sip, and right before he does, he hears something behind him, and he turns and looks, and there's Childs. And Childs is comes up on him. He has a flamethrower, and he asks him a question, and he's like, "Where's all the rest of them?" And he's like, "They're gone." So what about you? How do you know I'm not a thing or whatever? He says, "Well, if either one of us were a thing, neither one of us are in any position or condition to do anything about it. We're wiped. We're done." And so Childs comes and sits in front of him, and MacReady takes his J&B bottle and hands it to him, to Childs, who then takes a sip. Now, they'd made a point earlier in the movie, a key point that was made, was hammered home. Since this thing can possibly taint you with one cell, everybody should drink from their own glass, pour their own drinks, fix their own meals, and be smarter to use canned food, because you can't trust anybody. But here he hands Childs, the whiskey bottle. Childs takes a sip and then hands it back to him, and Kurt Russell, MacReady, actually laughs and nobody really knows what that laugh was for. And he asked him, "What do you want to do now?" And he said, "Well, why don't we just sit here and think about it for a bit." So they know they're going to die. He's saying, we've got to die. We're not getting out of this. Let's do it. And that's the end of the movie. And so it's like, holy crap. I mean, talk about a cliffhanger. You don't know, is one of these guys, you're pretty confident that MacReady is not the thing. But the big question people have had ever since is Childs the thing? Now I want to ask you, Matty Man, what do you think?
Part of me would think it's easier to say he's actually been transformed, and it's
he meaning Childs.
Yes. It's almost, it's easier to say, oh, he's actually the thing,
Hmm.
And we just don't see anything happen because it's going to happen after the film ends.
They're going to freeze to death, and they'll come there when the humans come back, and Child's thing will be there and be like, "Oh, he almost died," and then
Yeah.
they take over the
Yeah.
world.
I mean, so certainly it could go that way,
Mm-hmm.
which would truly give it, it would fit in with what Carpenter considers his apocalypse trilogy.
Right.
And that would certainly be an apocalypse because that thing, we know it's going to take over the whole world. But what I'd like to think is the more chilling ending is that they are both human and they're both going to literally, the last minutes of their lives, are going to sit there both bracing, thinking maybe the other one is no longer human.
Yes, that's a beautiful thing about a darkly beautiful thing about this movie, because you don't truly know, but the whole time this movie's been going on, since the first time the thing revealed itself, nobody knows, and you are absolutely paranoid as hell. Like, who's next? You're pretty. Everybody's pretty sure McCready is never the thing. Again, narratively, he's our protagonist, and we're with him all the time, except for one
Yeah.
part where he goes away, and then he comes back right before they do the
Yeah.
blood test, but he survives the blood test, so we know he's not the
Up to
thing.
that point, and
Yeah.
but we hardly ever get to see any time outside of the reveal that he's human, that he could have possibly been infected later. You
Yes.
just really don't get a lot of cutaway time from him.
So the three real possibilities of this: one, almost no one ever mentions, and I had a brainwave when I was thinking about all this, but then later other people have mentioned it, so I wasn't the originator of this thought. Obviously, that this movie that's been around and studied for 40 years. Basically, you either, well, I guess there's four possibilities. Either both of them are the thing, which is not likely since they didn't acknowledge, hey thing, what's up? They're still mistrusting of each other. Either Kurt Russell is the thing, and he'd been drinking from this bottle, and now he gave it to Keith David Childs, who has now drank it, and he's going to slowly become the thing, which is most likely not even a possibility, because like I said, we've been with Kurt Russell and he's our hero through the whole thing, and there's no hint to him being the thing whatsoever. Childs is the thing, which is the prevailing theory of the whole thing, is that Childs was when he was looking out, that Blair came and attacked him and killed him. When Childs comes up to Kurt Russell at the end of the movie that I was mentioning, his jacket looks different. It doesn't look like the kind of dark blue that it was in the previous scene. It looks lighter. And that's why I pointed out specifically the scene where it pulls back and you see that he's wearing a dark jacket, and that there's a tan jacket behind him, because if he'd been converted, he'd put on those clothes and then he would go out. But somebody has gone in and said, well, there's frost on it, and the color palette from the flames behind them has changed it. So they took out the yellow from the flames, and his jacket looks blue. So it looks like he does have the same jacket on. Look at the hoops that people are going through to try to figure this out so many years later.
Yes. One that I read recently was that the bottle he handed Childs was actually gasoline, and he's laughing because he just realizes, he just drank it, didn't even think about it. But that to me doesn't ring true, because he was drinking.
Right. Because
you already saw him drinking. Yeah. It's like he was drinking gas too,
Yeah.
So.
The camera had pulled up. When the camera came up on him, when you see Childs walking, he was starting to drink. He hadn't drank, but he was going to drink. And, in reality, to him, there's no camera there. So he's going to drink. And if it was kerosene, why the hell would he drink kerosene? So, I agree with you. I don't think that holds water. No pun intended. Also, there's, people say, there's a scene earlier when they do the blood test where one of the editors had gone in when they were editing the movie and had kind of washed out the eyes of Palmer, who was the thing at that time.
Yeah.
And everybody else had a glint to their eye, just a glint of life like everybody does. But in that scene, he doesn't have it. And so because of the bad lighting, people thought, well, Keith David doesn't have it either. But that's not really true. You can see it, but the light, it's just not the lighting isn't that well
Yeah, but
done.
the thing, and once again, maybe that's all the way he's placed in front of the fire and the lighting in both of the situations, whether it's the eyes or the jacket.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe Carpenter liked the fact that this will confuse people.
Could be,
You
could be
know,
that
it could be confusing for them to leave it ambiguous.
he did address that specifically, though. Thankfully,
Oh, good.
he's
Okay.
been very mum is the word kind of thing about it because he likes, and he should. I hope he never tells anybody, even though I hope to know, right?
Yeah.
But I don't really want to know. We really want it to be something they're talking about 100 years from now. He just doesn't tell anybody. But he said, yeah, they did do that for that one particular scene, but it's just low lighting. It wasn't anything that was specific. And he's also made very clear he's the only one that knows who a thing is. He's joked that like somebody wrote to him and was like, can you at least tell us if one of the guys is a thing? And he says, yes, at least one of them is a thing, which I think is a joke because of course they're a thing. They're a person, right?
Yes, right.
He's being a smart ass,
Yeah.
which is perfect for John Carpenter if you know him, anything about him. But
Yeah.
of course, the biggest thing that people have said for years and years and years is that you can't see the breath from Childs. So that, yes,
Oh, that's right. Yes, I read that one recently too.
then there's there's no breath. So he, as the thing, he wouldn't be breathing, but that's not true either. That doesn't hold water. There's several scenes where one of the characters, particularly one that is in mid transformation as the thing, and they catch him and he screams, oh, and you just see this big stream of frost from his breath come out. So they definitely
And we
breathe.
also know they breathe because they made a point earlier in the film where they were looking at the it was either the dogs or the burned out body from the Norwegian camp, and Blair mentioned that there was a full set of organs.
Right. Yeah. So they absolutely 100% mimic whatever creature it is they do. So people breathe, so they breathe. Do they need to breathe? Probably not, but they do breathe because
they've basically taken over that form, and that form has lungs, and that form breathes.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's so the major things that point for Childs being the thing is no glint to his eye, and John Carpenter said that's not true. It was in that one scene, but that just for that one scene to show the dread that the thing actually has, because he knows the jig is up. He's just sitting there waiting for it to happen. And Childs, it's just dark outside, and there's fire around them, but it's starting to die down. So if you look at that whole scene, you do see a glint to his eyes, just in certain angles not, because he doesn't have light there. And you also have the question of is he drinking gasoline? The answer, like you said, is no, because we were just literally, McReady was in mid motion to drink it himself. So it's definitely alcohol.
The reason I think it's alcohol, and they would be okay with drinking or sharing that, regardless of whatever advice they were trying to adhere to earlier, is that they know they're dying. They're not escaping. They know they're freezing to death. So what's it matter? And even if one is the thing and the other is not, and they're just waiting, it's like there's nothing they can do anyway. That's what he says. There's nothing we can do. Nothing we can do about it now.
And we truly don't know if Blair, when he was a human and he came up with this theory, we don't really know if he's right that all it takes, one cell could inject it. They never really state it that way. We see Blair when he assimilates the other guy right before the end of the movie. He touches him, puts his hand through his face, basically. And when the thing is assimilating the dogs, I mean, he's spraying them with all kinds of stuff, and he's like grabbing them with his tendrils rather, and pulling them closer to him and stuff. So I think it takes more than just this guy licked the side of your face, so now you're going to become the thing. I don't think it necessarily works that way, but we don't really know.
Well, but they kind of had it. Maybe it was because of the early in the film when they have the burned up corpse, but it's thawing and it's dripping.
Right.
I think they're implying that's how the first of the American team is infected outside of the dogs.
Right.
So I don't know. Yeah, it's many ways you can become infected.
It could be, and that's what makes it great. So here's my theory on it. For many years I was torn between what you had said about, oh, I really prefer that they're both humans, and just like us through this entire movie, they're just going to basically be looking each other in the eye till it thaws over with frost and they die. They don't know. We don't know, they don't know, but they're both humans. That makes it even that much more tragic, right?
Yeah, exactly. I just think that ups the tragic ante,
Right. And then there's the other thought that I've gone along with, that, Child's, even though I saw his frosted breath, it's like, yeah, he could be. It really is suspicious that he left right before the Blair thing had destroyed the generator. He like leaves to go out. So you don't know, is he a thing and he's trying to go out somewhere where he can freeze and be safe from these other guys hunting him? He knows that Blair is a thing, but if there's two of them, then if he goes out into the snow away from these guys, that ups his ability to freeze and wait for the next
Right,
possibility.
exactly.
So that's highly suspicious, let's just say. But saw a video doing research for this where I'm now convinced that they're both humans. And here's why. Logic. So Childs, we see McReady go to drink, and then Childs sneaks up on him. Now he has a flamethrower. If he's a thing, he asked him, what about Knowles and Gary? They didn't make it. Okay, so now he knows, okay, well, McReady over here, who's so exhausted he can barely lift a finger, and I'm holding a flamethrower, and then I'm on it, I'm right at his back. I could kill him. If he's a thing, he could kill him, game over, and then just go and sit down and freeze and wait for the next humans to come. But that isn't what he does. He goes over and puts the weapon down and sits there and shares a drink with him. He's a human.
Mm-hmm.
He's just like McReady. He's like, I'm just assuming you're a guy. I'm a guy. And it's, we're not going to kill each other. Let's just sit here and freeze to death. And then that's, hopefully that's the end of the danger for humanity.
Right. Yeah. But the thing is but that is the point, is that there's still going to be paranoia.
Yes. And enough paranoia that here we are all these years later talking about it. Now, there was a video game, I think I mentioned before that, but I didn't want to spoil anything talking about it. There was a video game that came out years later that John Carpenter considers canon. And in that video game, Childs and McReady froze to death. They were humans.
Mm-hmm.
So he has said before that is canon, and in it, they're both human. But when he's been asked about it, he says it's a video game. But didn't you consider it canon? And he's like, I don't want to talk about it anymore. So we don't know. We truly don't know, and none of it's real. I mean, it's a freaking movie, right?
But that's the great. That makes the best. The best endings are the ones where there's a lot of reasons why it could be ending A or ending B. Either is very probable. I just go off the hunch that, if you're trying to write something that's going to really give the greatest punch to the gut, is going to be the fact that they're both just going to, to their last breath, going to be looking up at the other guy.
Right. In mistrust and terror, as well as, well, what the hell am I going to do?
Yeah. So it's like you're going to be accepting, you're going to hope for the best, but you're going to still be wondering.
It's absolutely brilliant. And there have been brilliant movies before. There have been brilliant movies since. But to have Blade Runner, this genre-defining science fiction masterpiece that talks about the human condition and what we leave behind, and have John Carpenter's The Thing that talks about paranoia, mistrust,
but also the human condition.
The human condition. They came out on the same day, man. That is nuts.
Yeah. And that both did not do well in their initial run.
And both ended up being considered the two greatest of their genres.
Yeah.
By many people.
Like the acme of that. Like not only are there high parts in their genres, but transcend their genres.
Yes. Yeah, they're great. And we love them, and we're we're coming up against the deadline here, folks, but I just, I want to say, and I'm sure Maddie will agree with me here. If you have not seen Blade Runner and you have not, and or have not seen John Carpenter's The Thing, these are two movies that you absolutely must see. If you like storytelling, if you like thought-inducing cinema and drama, action, character building, done in a way that doesn't just assume that you're a total idiot and they need to spoon feed everything to you, you definitely need to see these two movies. If you've seen them before and haven't seen them in a long time, go watch them again.
Yep. Every time you watch them, there'll be a little more payoff for you. There'll be something you did not notice.
And if you're a woman like my wife, you will just stare at Harrison Ford in awe at just how cool and badass and good looking and pensive the guy is. And then you'll turn and you'll see Kurt Russell at the peak of absolute manly badassery and a man of action and sacrifice. And this will, this was a different breed of character and a different breed of actor. And both of these guys at their absolute height of
yeah,
their
definitely
prowess.
at their peak.
Yeah. It's and both filmmakers as well. I mean, John Carpenter has made many things since that are awesome, but this is his favorite movie. He said it. This is, of all his movies he's made, this is his favorite movie. And of course, Ridley Scott has we know that he's proud of what he was doing with Blade Runner, because he went back and made other additions for it to focus his. He could have just left it and let it go.
Yeah, it's kind of like David Lynch. Like, he doesn't want to talk about Dune, even though I think what he did within the constraints of Hollywood at that time was an incredible effort.
So that was a lot of fun. I've enjoyed it.
It was a blast, my man.
Yep, that's right. And so we will see you with the next time that we have an episode come out. We'll let you know on Twitter. Check those things out. Check out
on all of the socials, Joe. We'll have it out there.
Right. That's what the kids do today. So until then, he's been Mattyman.
And he's Vannyboy.
And you're listening to The Rusty Playground. Peace out.
Yes, peace out. We are the coolest.
We are.